What is going on? I want to welcome you from F Court for today, Friday, October 21st. I'm your host, Sean Murphy, and today we got to talk about opening night, specifically the basketball that we saw the Pistons defeating the Orlando Magic at home in their home opener for the 2022-2023 season. The debuts of not only the number one overall pick, Paolo Banchero, but also for the Pistons, Jaden, Ivey, and Jalen duren. Also, the Pistons debut for Bojan Bogdanovic, Kevin Knox, and others. A lot of things to dive in to discuss from a basketball perspective. But first, before we get into that, I do want to shout out all the fans that came out and supported and said hi and introduced themselves and gave us a hug, dapped us up, said hi, and said they listened to the podcast. It was overwhelming the amount of people that came up and said hi. And I mean that in the best way possible. It was insanely humbling. And man, it was just so cool just to finally, meet some people, shake some hands, and take pictures with people. It was just really cool, man. So seriously, shout out to everyone that I saw at the Pistons game. Even if you might have saw us and, didn't say hi, definitely feel free to in the future. I'll definitely be going to more Pistons games this season. But with that, let's talk about the basketball we saw. Let's talk about what we can take away. Because first of all, the one thing that I took away from this game immediately when seeing this roster was that the talent is just a different level. And being there in person, the one thing that I can really say, first of all, from watching these players in person for the first time, is that watching them on TV doesn't do it justice. You have to see in person how impressive of an athlete Jaden Ivey is, how impressive of an athlete Jalen Duren is. I mean, the first thing I saw, when I saw Jalen Duren, I was just like, holy, he is massive, just massive. And it's not like he's towering over any bigs, but he's big enough to where, he's not going to be pushed over by any means. And the other thing is just on the court, off the court, everything about him, just his general demeanor. He didn't look like an 18-year-old. And the way that he played the game, he got a double-double in his first NBA game, the second youngest player in NBA history. By the way, the youngest person to ever do it was Dwight Howard, the person he's directly compared to. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Jalen Duren had a double-double, didn't commit a single personal foul, played key minutes down the stretch in the fourth quarter. I know it's one game, but that's huge. And for that to happen in his first game just shows how much they truly believe in Jalen Duren. This kid's never touching a G League gym. He's not. And if he keeps putting up those types of performances, and we're like 10 games in, and he keeps playing like that, we're going to be having a conversation pretty soon about him possibly being in the starting lineup. And the crazy thing is that we saw great play across the board, and we saw how deep this roster is, and we still didn't get Nerlens Noel. We still didn't get Alec Burks. We still didn't even get Isaiah Livers. And that's the question, is like, where are the minutes going to go? Because there were 10 guys who played tonight. There are 13 players on this team that have genuine cases for minutes. That's crazy. And even the crazy thing, like, you look at our entire bench unit, Jalen Duren was the one that played the most. I mean, Killian Hayes played 16 minutes. That's about it. And by the way, like, I know a lot of people are reacting to Killian's, shooting performance. He was 1 of 9. He was off from the field. It was just good seeing the aggression. And despite, going 1 of 9, he still was a +6 because of his defense, because of his playmaking, because of his rebounding. It was everything else that he did on the court that made him effective. 3 steals in 16 minutes is pretty damn good. And the looks that he had on the offensive end, I liked. And quite frankly, a lot of those looks were drives to the basket that just didn't go in. So I expect those looks to eventually go down a little bit more, because, I mean, listen, if Killian even's like 3 or 4 for 9 that night, we're having a different conversation. Right. So overall, like, let's give him a few more games. Let's give him the opportunity to, feel out this season, and then let's have a conversation. And again, it's only one game, but I was very impressed from what I saw from pretty much the entire starting lineup. I mean, let's start with the obvious. Jaden Ivey, his athleticism, his speed in person, specifically his ability to accelerate in the open court. It looks insane on TV. It's a whole different thing in person. Seeing how quickly he got to the court, to the other side of the court, I genuinely dropped my jaw. I sat there for a second like, and again, I've watched him play basketball quite a bit. So seeing that in person was just a whole different experience, but also he had a really, for his first game, a really, efficient game. Only 2 turnovers, 3 steals of his own, 4 assists, 3 boards, 8 of 15 from the field, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc. He was really aggressive, and it was in a way that, wasn't sloppy. And I just thought overall that he had a really good game. Obviously there were moments, at the beginning of the game where, he was struggling, and obviously there were looks that weren't the greatest, but once Jaden Ivey can really start getting that mid-range game going as well. Kool-Aid talked about that quite a bit on Woodward Pistons Table Talk that we did last night. Go check that out, by the way, on Woodward Pistons. And shout out to Kool-Aid, by the way, and all the Woodward Pistons crew. Thank you so much to him for putting that together and, in providing those tickets and helping make that happen. It was just great to be able to be there. And he's just the greatest, man. One of my best friends in this planet, one of the greatest reporters that we have in the Pistons space. But man, talking about things that were just great. I mean, Cade Cunningham was fantastic. A lot of people were harping on, in the first half, he only has 5 points. He's not being aggressive. And then the second half happened. He went out and he had 18 points, 10 assists in his first game, got a double-double. Got to the line 4 times. Was getting a lot of really good looks for his teammates. And, Cade was coming out and being aggressive as a facilitator first. And the thing about Cade that makes him great is that he's not going to be the guy that's going to come out and get 30, 40 points every single night, but he's going to make the guys around him better. He's going to get guys great looks. And he was the one that got the open look for Isaiah Stewart from the corner, at the end of the game, which, by the way, Isaiah Stewart, even though, shooting wise, he was 1 of 4 from beyond the arc tonight, not his greatest, night from the 3. It went down when it mattered. It went down at the most tense moment. It went down when it wasn't even, he wasn't even the guy that people were expecting to get that shot. The play was for Cade to make a play, and he made a play. And, that's the thing you want to see. It felt like the extension of the identity that was being built last year. And to see that being married with, like this young team taking the leadership and the reins, but also having veterans come in like Bojan Bogdanovic, which Bojan Bogdanovic was exactly as advertised. When you talk about a bona fide bucket getter, when the Pistons were, down early, down 21-6, by the way, the guy that came in and, scored quite a bit and, set the tone on the offensive end, Corey Joseph, I would argue Corey Joseph, he was 3 for 3 from the field, 2 for 2 from beyond the arc. Pretty much a lot of that was in the second quarter. He arguably got the Pistons back in this game. Him and Jalen Duren both setting the tone off the bench. And then after that, when Bojan started to get going, he went 6 of 10 from beyond the arc. He hit 6 threes. He had a stop. He had a stop and pop 3 in particular in the third quarter. And the thing that I loved was that the fans just loved him right away. Once he started hitting shots, he was playing with energy. He was challenging on the defensive end. Bojan Bogdanovic is a pro's pro. He's been, he looked like he's been here longer than just 3 weeks. And at the end of the day, like if the Pistons have the opportunity to extend him this offseason, I think they have to take it. I mean, just his shot making ability alongside Saddiq Bey is going to open up so much more for him. And I think we're going to see, truly how much it's going to help Saddiq's offensive game in the long term. Sadiq took more of a backseat on the offensive end tonight, but on the defensive end was really aggressive against guys like Franz Wagner, against guys like Paolo Banchero, which we'll get to Paolo in just a second because I do want to touch on him before we end the video. But man, Sadiq, on the defensive end impressed me quite a bit as well. And in that leading, in that starting lineup, he was the leading rebounder of even over guys like Isaiah Stewart and Bojan, who are the power forward and center. So that's saying something as well. 3 of those on the offensive end. So he was getting second chance looks for guys as well. So that's value. And when you're ultimately doing things like that are contributing to wins, that's what you want to see. And because even though Sadiq wasn't like the greatest as far as like, as far as getting shots and as far as production on the offensive end from a statistics standpoint, he was still a +6. The reason why was because he was playing good team basketball. He was filling the roles he needed to. He was playing good defense. He was challenging Paolo on that end. That's what you want to see. And so I was encouraged by that, especially because Sadiq, it hasn't been the greatest defensive player at times. And especially with the absence of a guy like Jeremy Grant, which that absence was felt at the beginning, especially when Paolo was getting going. It wasn't felt nearly as much towards the end. And I think that was because not only of Sadiq, and his ability on the defensive end, but also just the team commitment that they're having. And I was impressed by Cade's vocal leadership on the defensive end as well, leading a lot of switches for guys like Jalen Duren and Kevin Knox and guys that are around him on the court. When you're playing that type of switching defense, it's all predicated on communication. It's all predicated on knowing who's got to be where and when and who's leading that. And I know I saw Killian taking quite a bit of that leadership as well when he was on the court, and he had a lot of great dimes as well when he was in the offensive end, being that, that leader on both ends. But Cade, he was being that too. So a lot of credit to them on that sense. It just overall, this team is a lot more athletic. And I could even just say from a basketball perspective, from an enjoyment standpoint, being there because I'm not gonna lie, like last night when I was in the arena, I didn't have credentials. I allowed myself during the game to enjoy it as a fan, right? And as a fan, I can say that this is the most exciting game I've been to since I was a kid, just from the product that they put on the court as far as basketball goes. When you look at this roster, the athleticism, the ability to get into the open court with guys like jaden Ivey, guys like Jalen Duren. When Jalen Duren threw it down on Okiki, holy cow. That was an incredible moment. That felt like Jalen Duren making a statement, and that blew up all over social media. Like Jalen Duren has arrived. And again, it's just one game. It's just one dunk. But the fact that, it just felt like this was the roadmap, and this was the plan that Pistons fans needed to see, as far as like they needed to see remnants. It felt like that this was heading somewhere. It really felt like that was needed, especially after how the preseason went, especially with how the Tigers season went, especially with how the Lions season's been going. I just feel like we needed something, man. I feel like we just needed a win, and we needed a good win. We needed an exciting win. And I know the Red Wings have been playing well, like, but like there's something different about when, like something like the Pistons are playing good basketball, especially when it's been years. And let's be honest, like if we're gonna lose games, you want to at least be exciting when you're losing games, right? Like you want to at least see some highlights. So like if this team's gonna lose games this year, and if like we're still gonna end up in a position at the end of the day where we're still gonna like not quite make the play in and like still like be in like the lottery conversation, at least it's gonna be a fun watch. At least this team's gonna go out and like work their asses off every night. Guys like Bojan Bogdanovic are gonna have surprising performances, and like he could honestly be our leading scorer this year. There's a legitimate case that Bojan's our leading scorer, just with how consistent he is. The guy's a career 20-point a game guy. I mean, his actual average is 18 points a game. But nonetheless, he can go out and get 20 points a night if need be. He got 18 points a game on a team that won 60 plus games last year. That means he's pretty good. Just to let you know. Before we end this video, Paolo. Holy shit, I love Paolo. I love Paolo. There's just certain guys that you watch and they just get it. And that's Paolo. Like there's just he is very polished from day one. And looking back, it just makes so much sense that he was the pick for Orlando. Just thinking about the fact that he's a bona fide stud, can create offense from day one, especially when that was such a problem for Orlando last year. Now, even with guys like Jalen Suggs, who he was making some shots. He was 4 for 6 from beyond the arc. He looked really impressive. I thought he looked a lot better in year one. Franz Wagner, I thought he's just going to be a bona fide lethal scorer as well. Just one of those Bojan Bogdanovic types where he could just create offense any single night. He had 20 points himself, but man, Paolo to get 27 points, 11 of 18 from the field, not even taking a three, just going out, playing ISO balls, getting in the mid range, getting to the basket, drawing fouls, rebounding really well, getting the ball to other guys. Like this guy's it. Like he is going to be an all-star. This guy is going to be an all NBA player one day. And like, there's definitely remnants of guys like, like Blake Griffin and like Carmelo Anthony, but at the end of the day, this is a wing, a big who can score the basketball, handle the basketball, create for other guys. The Orlando Magic are going to be very exciting to watch. They're going to be one of my league pass teams this year for sure. And I know that, I was really, really, I saw Cade's debut last year was also against the Orlando Magic. So I've been able to see this team 2 years in a row now. This team's a lot better now than they were last year. I mean, even guys like, Wendell Carter Jr. and like his presence and his coming out party and, what he's been for them, even steady guys like Terrence Ross, a former Dwayne Casey player, by the way, in their backcourt, just the steady presence he has. Guys that didn't even play like Cole Anthony, I know he was shitting on Detroit, but, still a guy that can play. And even Bull, his first minutes in a couple of years, he looked pretty impressive as well. So I definitely think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic if you're the Orlando Magic. They were definitely, in the first quarter, they looked like the better team. And like, when they were playing with those lengthy, lineups and playing that 2-3 zone, that was terrifying. But overall, what were your thoughts of opening night? What do you think of the Pistons' potential this season after watching what they did? What did you think of Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren and the rookies that we have? And are you starting to think that Jalen Duren maybe should be starting, like, kind of like maybe I'm starting to maybe think a little bit in the back of my head too, because it's like, man, it's only one game. It's only one game. He's not even 19 yet. Sean, stop. Stop. But anyway, that's going to do it, folks. We want to thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure you're subscribed for more Pistons and NBA coverage. We will catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribed.